been quite a day. Our last session for today concerns serious games. We have two esteemed panelists to help us through this territory. Vance Souders, who's a producer for BreakAway and also has an affiliation, works with Firewater on developing serious games. We also have Howard Degenholtz, who is Associate Professor of Health Policy and Management at the Center for Bioethics and Health Law.
Perfect.
And whose field of practice also touches on the subject of serious games, which are in part what their title implies, but are much more. And we're going to start our conversation before we open the floor with Vance, who's going to talk about his practice and work, but also give us a little bit more of an explanation of what exactly serious gaming is and how it works in its field.
Sounds good. Okay, hi guys. If you have any questions, I guess, during this, just definitely speak up during it. Don't necessarily wait to the end. I'm going to go over a little bit about just me and then some of the projects I've worked on. I'll touch on how we've used serious games, some of the pitfalls that we've run into. If you guys are thinking about developing them for somebody or you've had people come to you, this should be helpful. As far as me, I've been doing this for about 13 years. I started out as a programmer. My background's actually in biology. That didn't last too long, and I went on to programming, and eventually from there I started to mix more design elements in, and eventually my role has now shifted over more toward production, although I still have my hands in the code quite a bit actually these days. I've been on some actually really great projects that have done some really innovative things for their time and stuff that has actually worked out really well. And I've been on some things that have been train wrecks, that have been bad enough that you wanted to call the NTSB in to figure out what's gone wrong. A variety of clients, a lot of military type stuff, but also National Institutes of Health, DARPA, Air Force. Did a little bit of stuff for the EPA, and some of the stuff I'll show you that's most recent is actually for a commercial client who is actually, I think, the largest maker of eyeglass lenses in the world, which is now a universe that I know far more about than I ever thought I would. So before I even get into this, just a little bit of background about what serious games are and where they've come from. I mean, back around maybe in early 2000, 2002, 2003, I think the definition of serious games has sort of evolved a little bit over time, but the general gist is that you're going to take a game or an interactive platform, something that's at its core is fun and entertaining, and you're going to use it to change behavior in some way or to fulfill a learning objective. That's probably at its kernel is what you can consider a serious game to be. As we'll see in a little bit, one of the things that you're actually going to run into as a problem is that not all clients actually understand that definition the same way. A lot of people hear serious games, and especially in the DoD, but it actually happens with commercial clients as well. And what they think of it is more of a simulation. So if you have fun elements or elements of whimsy or things that really are meant to drive engagement, depending on the client, that could actually be a turnoff, which definitely can be a problem. Things to consider, fidelity of the simulation or game, sort of where you want to be on the game to simulation continuum. Platform considerations can be really large, whether you're on the mobile, whether you're on web, or you're on a social network like Facebook. We did a design for AIDS.gov, and they wanted it to be a social Facebook game. And during the early meetings, they very clearly wanted it to be very sexually explicit, which turned out to be a serious problem. So sometimes your platform, there are obviously platform restrictions with Facebook. Demographic considerations, who are you targeting? The issue of genre bias, which you don't necessarily hear a lot about, but certain genres of games skew one way or the other, both male, female, or to different demographics. And of course, cost. What hopefully you're seeing, and you are totally not. Can you go ahead? One more. This is actually a shot of something we're working on now. This is for the eyeglass lens manufacturer. This is Mary. She is a character in this simulation who has just gotten done with her actually getting her prescription, and now she is sitting in front of you, and you are going to help fit her in the lenses that are most appropriate for her. The goal of this as a serious game is to teach people the appropriate ways to interact with these characters, and eventually the patients, to get to sort of what their core needs are and make sure that they have the really the best possible lens type for their prescription. And this was driven, the company that hired us to do this found that when they would go out, and they actually had a pretty strong training regimen, when they would go out to locations, they found that more often than not, the people that were doing this really weren't diving into the needs of the patient. They were saying things like, well, you know, do you want what you had last time? And more often than not, the person goes, sure, and that's the end of it. Very, very rarely do they say, are you having any problems? You know, or they were using language that was too technical. I mean, doesn't everybody want photochromatic lenses with, you know, an AR coating? And most people just have no idea what you're talking about when you say that. And they came to us and they said, what we want to do is we want to get people out of these habits. We want to do it in an engaging way. And what happened was we have 6 of these characters. Mary is one of them. And I can show you guys later if you want to come up. I've got this running on this laptop. And you can go through, you can talk to them. They all have personalities. They all have the ability, you can piss them off, you can make them happy. And if you've done a good job in the end, you get the right prescription and you get a score, and it lets you know how well you've done. If you do poorly, they will eventually actually walk out on you. And they all have really interesting personalities. We've had people come back in testing and say, one character, Gil, people come back and they say, I hate that guy. He's such an ass. And that's really a good thing though, because it means that the game and the story and the characters you've created are pulling people into that world enough that that they're actually, they're interested in it. And then if you move ahead one more, we'll get something that is obviously for a different client. This was done for the EPA for really, really small school children. And it was to teach them, really the instructional goal was to have something for the EPA where kids could understand maybe the need to sort, and if you actually end up putting these things in the wrong bucket, it'll actually, the little bucket gets sad and it spits them out. And the trash can is evil, and if you put enough stuff into the trash can, you lose. So very, very simple game. Less than a month to develop from scratch through testing, and this has a series of levels, and there's this little world you can explore. But again, very simple. So common pitfalls. These are things I've seen. I could probably take up an entire lecture on stuff, but the one thing that's not on here is, if you move ahead one more, that really should be on here is the game has to be fun. If it's not fun, you've sort of already lost. It has to be compelling, and you're going to get pushback from clients, other people, especially the larger the spaces where you're dealing with the number of levels of management something has to go through. People are always going to find things to poke at and not like. You have to make sure that your experience is fun the entire time. If it's not, people aren't going to play it, and if people aren't going to play it, they're not going to learn anything. So some other things, not having clear understanding of the learning or organizational objectives for the game. If you don't understand what you need, you're not going to be able to put a good design together, and then that's going to set you down a terrible, terrible path. So the more time you can spend up front with the client, learning what the needs are, and immersing yourself in the subject matter, the better off you'll be. This is something I've seen over and over again. Leave enough time in the schedule for iteration, and this is tough because almost always when you're doing this for a commercial client, it'll be part of the bidding process, and other people will be bidding against you. And there's going to be an urge to, squeeze as much as possible to get the schedule down and to get the cost down. It's not worth it. Make sure when you budget time for iteration, because the odds that your design is going to be right first time out of the gate, very, very slim. Focusing too much on the look of the game in the beginning instead of gameplay. I've seen this happen, and this has a variety of disastrous consequences. One is the client almost always thinks the game is further along than it really is, which is disastrous later in the pipeline, right? So,
at that stage right now.
Yeah, they're like, well, it's almost done, right? There's things that happen. And the other problem is that it can take you away from focusing on the core gameplay, which you may find out is no good, and you may find out it doesn't work very well. In fact, that bridge game, we've got an issue where the bridge falls apart at some point, and we're going to have to go back and redesign some stuff. If we had spent a little bit more time before we layered some art onto it, and lucky for us, we don't have to redo any of the art, but if it's not fun with blocks and cubes and just block down environments that are gray, sort of gray environments, and cylinders for characters, it's probably not going to be fun once you actually put stuff in. not enough testing within the target user population. The more you can get it in front of people, the better. Do it over and over again. Use Kleenex testers. I think there's usertest.com. There's tons of ways to get your app in front of people. The more you can, the better. Not agreeing on an acceptable level of abstraction, I can tell you this one is a personal favorite of mine. If we move on to the next screen, this was done for the military, and it's really, really hard to see. So I'll narrate briefly. Basically, they wanted their commanders to understand motivation better, which is interesting. And what we did was we said, well, let's see how we can do this in a simple, casual type game. And basically, you've got these little animated characters that sit at the bottom, and they all have personalities, and tasks sort of fall to the left. And in this is a motor pool, you could drag tasks onto the guys. The guys will either have a heart or a broken heart, and then they'll proceed to do the task. If they don't like the task, they may not do it as fast, they may have other issues, but luckily for you, you could drag motivators from the top onto them, and they might get a little happier, and they'll do the task faster, and if you complete all the tasks, everyone is happy. I can tell you when we first showed, and we were totally thrilled about this, it was fun to kind of play, and people came back and said, you know, Tom's sort of a lazy bastard, and things like that, which was sort of great too, because, you know, people were engaged. The client saw it, and it was a never-ending stream of things like, you know, that person wouldn't change the tire, or changing a tire wouldn't take this long, or all this stuff. Like, that was really not about what the game was about, and that you could still, and there was just no way out of it. Trying to explain to them that, you know, you could still teach the mechanics, or you could teach the objective with this. The game had to be completely redone. So figuring out where that level of abstraction is and where that level of gaminess is could save you a huge problem down the line. I will show you, this thing is ancient. This is probably from maybe 2003. That was done for Army Research Institute. And it is, if you move ahead one more, it is Bejeweled. It is Bejeweled for learning actually the Army insignias. This was one of a series of 3 games, and they found when people came into the Army, they were terrible at this, and apparently nothing pisses off superior officers more than walking up to them and not knowing you should salute them. So this was one of 3 games that were developed. It was developed in Torque at the time. Very, very simple, and they loved it. I think that as long as what you've got manages to teach the learning objective, you could call it a serious game. It doesn't have to be overt in any way, shape, or form. I think the ideal situation is that it's not overt in any way, that the game has managed to seamlessly blend it in whatever world that you've created, and you know, you're learning what you need to learn. And I think that really the reason you don't see that more often, sometimes it's cost, but I think a lot of times it's hard sometimes to get the client to agree to that. And if you go and you say, we could totally teach, you know, we can teach squad tactics, but it'll be on a space station, I think, you know, you'd get some funny looks. But I think as this evolves, I think that that'll happen less and less.
It's not out in the marketplace yet, but is a social game, a casual game that also has a very serious message and content to it. And what we did was we wove into the gameplay real facts and information about the issue of organ donation and transplantation. And we worked for a long time last summer, going through many iterations of the game design with our developer to come up with something that we really think achieves what you were setting out. We'll see how well it plays in the marketplace. Let me back up. So my name is Degenholtz. I'm faculty at University of Pittsburgh. I came all the way from Pittsburgh to be here today. And I have been working in health policy for a long time now. And over the past few years, I've gotten involved in research on organ donation and transplantation. So I come about this from the public health world, from the health side of things. And we've been doing lots of projects on encouraging people to sign up to become an organ donor. So let's just see a show of hands. Who in this room is an organ donor? It's on your driver's license. That's fantastic. You are not the target audience for this. Actually, you are the target audience for this. Because what we are trying to do is create a game that educates people about organ donation and transplantation issues, and have something where it's attractive to people who play games as a strategy, so that it'll get some
publicity and then start to reach people who are maybe interested in the issue, but not game players, or game players who are not necessarily interested in the issue. So we think from a marketing point of view, that our early players are probably going to be committed, but we're hoping that it'll expand out through their social network. We don't know if that's going to actually take place. That's the experiment part of it. I got onto this trip because in about 2007, 2008, I saw a lot of my colleagues in this field of organ donation issues really thinking about how can we use the internet to spread the message about organ donation and transplantation. The general issue, the broad stroke, is that there's over 113,000 people on the waiting list for an organ donation, and only about 28,000 transplants take place a year. So there's this huge gap of people who are pro-donation but are not signed up, and there's a lot of unmet need out there. And it took about 2 years to get a grant funded, and the grant was funded, and we started in 2009, and now it's like almost halfway done with 2012, and we're just finally getting the prototype of this game out there. So it's a humongously long, phenomenally long process. But along the way towards commissioning a game, I've learned a lot about the industry, more than I ever did before. And so some of the things that we did is we hired a gaming company, a local startup in Pittsburgh that was in the advertainment sector, but not necessarily the serious gaming business. And they created for us a mobile social game. We came up with something that was designed, and our goal and the mission that I tasked them with was something that was going to be more fun. And as a consequence, the content of the game is not a text overlay. It's not like a heavy, you have to do this or else this will happen. It's not overly scripted, but instead it is designed to be entertaining and engaging and social, in the sense that while you're playing the game, you can communicate about it with Twitter and Facebook and so forth. And I can explain that in a little more detail. But we went through, to come back to your point about simulation and abstraction, we started out with a game that was perhaps overly realistic. So we had on this sort of game board, the way the game works is that patients come in and they interact with different stations in the hospital, and then at some points in the game there are mini games that pop up where you have to interact with the patient and so forth. And we started out with all these great ideas. Oh, we're going to have blood draws. We're going to have an endoscopy suite where you can actually do the endoscopy, and then all this stuff that sounded. We were like really excited, you know. We came up with all these ideas, and we had all these complicated scoring algorithms and stuff, and we put together some art, and we had a focus group, and we had a prototype, and we had several focus groups of people of all different ages, people who play games and waste a lot of time at work playing games, and they admitted that. And they hated it. They looked at this and they were like, oh my God, the blood draw makes me want to throw up. And these are people who play Call of Duty, all right? And we were like, what's going on here? And what came out through that interaction and that testing was that it was too realistic, and it did not have the escapism that makes a game. Your job is to choose the equipment that you need, to maintain the equipment, upgrade the equipment as necessary. So now the interaction of the player with the game is through this kind of level of abstraction with the actual underlying, visceral nature of what's going on. So we built a new prototype. We took that to back to our same focus group panel. They loved it, and they loved the fact that we took their advice. They also loved the new game and the art, and everybody sort of was very excited about it. So we went into production, and that, of course, is taking longer than we expected. I can go on. Let me say one important aspect to the game, two important aspects to the game. So you said that serious games have to instill or are built around a behavior change. That's the goal. The goal is not making money. The goal is not selling advertising. The goal is not any clicking to extract nickels or dimes or quarters from your customers. The game is to encourage people to go and sign up to become an organ donor, and also to spread the message about the importance of signing up to be an organ donor. So there's a couple things in the game that do that, but let me tell you first the aspect of the game mechanic that actually does this. And that is this. And this is an important underlying scientific and clinical issue that's built into the gameplay. Most of the people, most of the throughput in a real transplant center are people who are on the waiting list but are coming for checkups. It's a very small fraction of the people that actually are going to have a transplant on that day. So that's reflected in the statistics of the patients that come through the game board. A very small number of them are actually going to get a transplant, and that's because of the scarcity of organs. Now, those patients, they're going to come in, they're going to get into a hospital bed. If you haven't set up enough hospital beds, you're going to have a backlog, and patients are going to walk out of the hospital. Now they're in the bed. You can't do the transplant until you have the right organ for the right patient. The availability of organs is based on national statistics about the prevalence of organ transplants. So that's built into the game, but we're not hitting people over the head with it. It's just built in. So hearts take the longest. You have to wait 48 hours of real time, that's real human time, for that heart to appear on your game board, in your sort of queue of objects that you can use in the game. But you can speed up that timer by sending out a message on Facebook that says, hey, guess what, I'm playing Dr. Transplant and I need a heart, can you
Is
help
there
me?
like a fluctuating number of hearts or different organs that will then be sort of translated dynamically into the gameplay? Or
So what the game will do is, so I didn't mention our partner, it's a company called Mogami, formerly known as Left Right Studios. So when you play the game, you'll be playing it through their gaming network. So that connects other users to each other through their social network. And there'll be a leaderboard. And the leaderboard will show your score in terms of ribbons and achievements. And then one of the things that'll be on the leaderboard is a global live saved ticker. So that shows of all of the people who are playing this game globally, how many transplants have they accomplished. Now that's not related to the real world. And there's some data validation problems with doing that. So for example, we can track how many people click the button to go to more info. This is what the menu screen looks like. So we know how many people are clicking the more info button on the screen, and then we can tell how many people click from there to go to an external website. But we can't tell how many people are actually signing up to be a donor from this program because of privacy concerns. So we don't have names associated with the users, and we can't get that data back from the state government.
You said that the thing that people most often is kind of come in and get checked out and then leave. Mm-hmm. Was there a compromise in terms of playability in saying, okay, it might be more interesting if half the people come and bleed or something, or operated on, but really this is how it is, so we should do it this way. How did you resolve this?
We want it to be accurate, and the way we've sort of made a balanced game out of it is we have built these mini games around different stations on the game board. So there is, if you keep going a bunch of slides, you'll come to the mini game section of the, there you go. So there's 3 different mini games that have been built, and if you go through, just keep going. There's 1, 2, and then 3. So one of those mini games is active in the OR suite, okay? The other 2 mini games are activated for other patients. So in other words, for the waiting list patients who are just coming through and getting checkups, there are 2 out of the 3 mini games are associated with that.
I think a lot of the folks are working with organizations that are looking to solve problems or do something that is educational in nature, and you both have given great examples of games that are designed to inculcate, whether directly or not directly, or overtly, not overtly, different ideas and learning. Earlier in the day, we had a couple of people gave the example of Folded, which is a protein folding game that led to a breakthrough in our knowledge about HIV, and was more of a problem solving than, say, a learning engine. Are those sort of the two main modalities that you see? And a couple of years ago, I attended a lecture by Jay Magano, I think. And the big advertisement there were these monstrous statistics about how many people are involved in massively multiplayer online games, and the fact that if we actually harness that time and sort of human thought to solve problems, it would be a miracle. And yet the scale of interaction with a lot of serious games is a tiny fraction of that kind of participation. I guess the question is, does that really matter? Because even if you're not hitting, the usership of World of Warcraft, you can still move the needle somewhere if it's a problem-solving endeavor. And also, educationally, does that still apply? I mean, I've heard a lot of criticism of serious games sort of failing on that front, but is it really a failure?
Sure. Well,
Yeah, I think the moving the needle is important. If for an organization or for a specific goal, like increasing the number of people who are organ donors, you don't have to have, you don't necessarily have to have 50 million people playing it for it to move that needle. I mean, as long as you can move it and it gets the awareness out there, that's fine. As far as the games like Folded, I think that you can almost consider them almost like, mechanical Turk style stuff. Like you get a game out there that's fun, and as long as people use it and they understand why, sort of what their input is to it, I think that that's great as well. I mean, I guess the question comes up, will there ever be a serious game that is, a AAA title that, so many people are playing or something? And I think it will happen. I think that one day, I think there was a great lecture at the Game Developers Conference about, it was a panel actually, maybe about 3 or 4 years ago, and someone said, wouldn't it be great if Medal of Honor was really about honor? And it's just a great, I mean, there is an opportunity that people haven't necessarily, I think, fully explored. I think that what has probably hurt serious games a little bit is that there is that thing where people do see them as not fun, or in some cases they are, in some cases they're not. In some cases they overreach visually and don't have a good gameplay experience. There's been a lot of inconsistency, but I think that as we move forward, we're seeing much more interesting things that are tighter on the instructional front, and that are out there for really great causes. And I think that it'll make a difference. But
the question is, will people do it and play it and continue to play it because it's fun and engaging, and then get exposed to that underlying message? So I don't know if that's answering. I think that's what I'm trying. I don't know. I'm coming at it as an outsider. So
I completely agree. I mean, I think that should be the core goal. Ideally, the game should be indistinguishable from any other game that's out there. And people should play it, and then they should walk away and they should have discussion. Maybe they say, their attitude toward organ donation has changed. And they think about it the next time they go and they get their driver's license renewed.
I hope so.
That would be the huge win there.
That's the goal.
Yeah. And I think that should be the goal for anything like this. And sort of goes to your question a little bit earlier. And I think that we haven't necessarily seen that yet with a lot of things. And some of it is because maybe clients haven't been ready, the environment hasn't been quite ready. But I do hope that changes. And I hope that it becomes more pervasive. There are even some cases, I think it's not the Prius, it's the Nissan Leaf actually has a little miniature game built into the infotainment center that it shows you, I want to say it's massively multiplayer, but I don't want to incorrectly speak. I think it actually can update and figure out where you are against other people for how well you've been basically, driving the car and extending your range. It's like a range extender type game. I think it's an evolution of what's in the Prius because they have the little trees.
Honda Insight has similar kind of thing.
But it's really clever, right? Because they're taking that, and in a way they're trying to modify your behavior. And part of it is that you may think it's a fun little game, but the reality is you don't know. And actually they could be trying to modify your behavior to reduce the repair wear cycle on the battery, right? Like, you're like, this game's so nice, they love the environment. Meanwhile, someone's like, well, we just saved 50,000 battery changes by getting that person to do that. I bet it's becoming more pervasive, right? And if the end user enjoys it, it sort of benefits everybody.
We had stuff that people just were grossed out over, and like I said, some of these people played Call of Duty, they played Plants vs. Zombies, they played, and some of them were healthcare professionals who got into our group, and they just looked at it and they said, this is just too close to home, it's too realistic, and they were really kind of troubled by something that was, even though it was set up very cartoonish, they just thought it was too close to the clinical reality of it. And the consequence of putting out something like that was that they thought, when we asked them, who do you think would be the target audience for this game, sort of classic focus group prompt, what they said was, well, this would be really good with medical students or high school students. And when they said that, we just were sitting behind the one-way mirror saying, okay, we just screwed up here, because that's not the goal. The goal is a mass entertainment product.
Right.
So we had to really rethink it. So I would say that the lesson there, and I've heard this sort of, each time I tell the story to different audiences, it seems, everybody seems to share this understanding, which is, well, which is that people come to games for an escape. So if the game doesn't provide enough abstraction, then it's not going to be entertaining. And that doesn't mean it's not useful. It just means that it maybe will function better in a mediated context where your use of that, and it might actually be fun, but people won't play it because it's fun. They'll play it because they need to play it or they were told to play it, as opposed to choosing to play it.
Right. So you feel that optimistically, even though it may require a lot of abstraction, there is in theory a solution for any kind of subject. I mean, if you want to say you're a social service organization dealing with race relations or women's rights, you want to talk about abortion, is there a way to kind of educate people about those issues and engage them that is fun, that still can kind of relate back to what is a very serious and controversial subject?
I think there is. I think, we've gone, we had someone came to us one time for Defense Acquisition University, and they wanted someone, they do a lot of acquisition stuff, which nothing says fun like acquisition, right? And we had they wanted a design for like time phasing techniques, which it sounds like Star Trek until you read it, and then you realize that it's actually how to plan out your project over 4 years and all this kind of stuff. And we sat down and we managed to put a design together for them, and it isn't always intuitive, and that's in a case where you're not dealing with controversial stuff, you're just dealing with dry material. For AIDS.gov, we put a design together for, they really wanted to teach, their demographic were sort of young inner city youth, and they said, we want to target this population. We're seeing a rise in rates of AIDS or HIV, and we want to do it through Facebook, and you have sort of the immediate problem of, you have to be careful where you are from, how you can't necessarily be overtly sexual. So there was, and you can in fact, so there was a lot of discussion of how to do that in a way that doesn't alienate people, doesn't, the joke at the time was, you don't want to create a design that ends up on the nightly news either. And we think we did that, and that project is still ongoing, but I think that there is almost always a way. And if there isn't, I think it's better for serious games to step away and to admit. It's better to admit if you find yourself backed into a corner that this is something that may not be appropriate for serious games, rather than push something out the door, and hope that it works out, because it probably won't.
Mm-hmm. How do you find like your target audience and get this to them? And how do you get the word out? Or is it just, you start with a bunch of people and it's inherently social and you're thinking, if the game dynamics really work, then it'll spread, which is true, but it's always kind of a crapshoot, isn't it? Zynga, they make games, they put them out, and then if they don't meet their metrics, they'll kill them before they develop them fully or whatever. Yeah. So what do you do? Your game's much more important, and it's this game, it's not just...
So we've got a whole marketing plan that we've been working on and refining, and it's sort of poised to be executed. And you are all part of my marketing plan, which is talk to gamers and get them excited and say, hey, wow, there's something interesting going on out there, drtransplant.org. And that's one. And that was the reason we went to GDC, and we passed out 10,000 brochures of GDC to sort of seed that, that community.
Once the game is live, we're going to do several different things. One is we're located in Pittsburgh, so we have some footprint in Pittsburgh, so we're going to do some outreach to the college campuses and sponsor like a game-a-thon and have people play the game and sort of run up some statistics on that. So that's one way to kind of generate some buzz. We got some press in the Post-Gazette when we sort of pre-release at GDC, and I think we'll get some more press when the game actually gets into the App Store. We also have a budget to buy advertising, so we're looking at buying advertising through some of the major advertising networks, so where you pay per install, and the hope is that by appealing to people who play similar types of games, they'll choose this because it's fun and it's a little bit different, and they can sort of feel good about playing it, but also enjoy playing it. And then hopefully that will kind of build on itself. If you have some other suggestions, please let me know, but those are the general things that we have.
So we could do a donation version.
Right.
And in fact, one of the things that we've been kicking around is like a public television underwriting model where we could have essentially advertising, but it would be in the form of advertising in the game that is health oriented, for example. So we haven't executed this plan, but we've sort of thought about and worked out some ideas whereby there's an X-ray machine in the game. Well, we could approach, one of the major manufacturers of that equipment and say, wouldn't you like to have a branded version of your equipment show up in our game as an option for players who achieve a certain, status or level in the game, and then that revenue would then go to the overall maintenance of the product. That would maintain our for-profit, free-to-play model without getting into the complexities of filthy lucre.